In this lesson, we're going to look at the different models of enzyme, and we're also going to look at competitive and non-competitive inhibitors and the characteristics of cofactors and coenzymes. So inhibitors play an important role in enzyme function. Some inhibitors occur in the body naturally as a means to controlling the production of a particular substance. And there are two types of inhibitors: competitive inhibitors and non-competitive inhibitors. And this is where the allosteric site comes into play. A competitive inhibitor basically sits itself down into the active site and blocks the substrate from entering. A non-competitive inhibitor interacts with the allosteric site, and when it does, it has a ripple effect that does something to change the shape of the active site such that the substrate can no longer interact with the active site. Both of these are important, and both of these strategies are sometimes used in medications. For example, penicillin is an enzyme inhibitor, and it inhibits the enzymes that are essential for the growth of pathogens. Many enzymes have a very specific job, so their active site only needs to accommodate one particular substrate, and as a result, they often follow what's known as the lock and key model. This means that the active site and the substrate have very similar shapes to one another. The other model is known as the induced fit model, and in this case, the active site has to adjust to the incoming substrate. If an enzyme has to interact with multiple substrates, it's more likely to have the induced fit model, but it can also be seen in enzymes that interact with only one substrate. Looking at the shape of the substrate and the active site, as well as the enzyme-substrate complex, what fit model describes this enzyme? When we look at the shape of the active site, what we see is that the shape doesn't exactly match the substrate, so they're not a perfect match. But we see that the substrate fits nicely into the enzyme. And what that tells us is the active site or the enzyme had to adjust to accommodate the structure of the substrate. And so this is an induced fit model. Sometimes enzymes can't work alone, and they need what's known as a helper molecule. And there are two types of helper molecules. There are cofactors and coenzymes, and their jobs are essentially the same. They do something or interact in some way with the enzyme and the substrate to make the reaction happen. The difference is that cofactors are primarily an inorganic species, whereas coenzymes are organic species. Is vitamin B12 an organic or inorganic compound? Given the amount of carbon and hydrogen present in this compound, we can classify this as an organic compound. Same molecule, vitamin B12, is this a coenzyme or a cofactor? Because it's organic, we would call this a coenzyme. There's really not a lot more to understanding the coenzyme versus cofactors other than understanding that their role is to help. The enzyme alone can't do the job that's needed, and so these helper molecules come in and interact in such a way to make it happen.